This is Luetin. So finally I'm bringing you my full review of Battlefield 3 Aftermath, and before I say anything else, I just want to say what I've been saying all week, which is that Aftermath really is the best DLC since Back to Karkand. DICE have really managed to design map layouts that will function really well for both console and for PC, and I think it's going to bring so much life back into the game right through into the new year and endgame. Something that's very noticeable about all of the maps in Aftermath is they all have a key area that seems to provide for superior combat. For Markaz, it's the Monolith building, for EPICENTER, the construction site, HD Palace itself, and the centre of Talar Market. All these locations are almost maps within maps, and their scale and design providing some of the best engagements you are likely to have in Battlefield so far. So what do you get with Battlefield 3 Aftermath? There are 4 new maps to choose from: Markaz Monolith, EPICENTER, HD Palace, and Talar Market. We also get the new game mode Scavenger, and of course the new weapon, the crossbow, as well as your typical new assignments with dog tags aplenty, although I can tell you I won't be changing out my Bad Company 1 tag anytime soon. We also have 3 new vehicles, the Phoenix, the Rhino and the Barsuk, all of which are lightly armoured but heavily armed with machine guns and auto grenade launchers. But be warned, these are not Humvees. The light vehicles on Aftermath will provide you with little protection from firearms, and a volley of machine gun fire can easily render a Rhino or Phoenix crew ready to rise from the ashes. You will also see the main battle tanks appear, as well as the scout helicopters for both the US and RU. The character models have been modified to fit within the scavenging post-earthquake rubble-strewn setting, with most players having helmets removed and looking more like guerrilla fighters. And the last subsidiary thing to note is that throughout some of the maps you'll find blue doors. These can be destroyed by explosives or simply by shooting the red explosive canisters at the bottom corner of the doors. These will then open up new routes for you to take and often will lead you directly onto MCOM objectives or let you bypass camped out conquest bases. So first up, let's jump straight in with the new game mode and the new weapon. What is the crossbow and how do you unlock it? Well, first of all, unlocking it, you unlock the crossbow by completing one of your first assignments called Sticks and Stones, and to do this you simply have to win 3 rounds of Scavenger. The crossbow is a modified rifle with a mounted bow mechanism to fire a single arrow bolt, and you can get 4 different types of bolt. The standard bolt is a one-hit kill, and this is the standard and unlocked with the weapon. The second bolt is a sensor bolt. Imagine basically a flying tugs which will mark and locate any enemies close to where you fire. I've said that it's a 12-meter radius. The third is the balance bolt, and this bolt has stabilizers which give little to no drop off but sacrifice power over range, so you may find at long distance it's not always a one-hit kill. So to be honest, it's a bit difficult to question its validity, but it does offer you the chance to have some long range capability if you are running a close range class. The last bolt is the high explosive bolt, and the best way to imagine this one is basically strapping a C4 pack to the bolt. This may sound a little bit overpowered, but it has only a small splash damage and has a very limited range. Its drop off is quite severe, so don't expect to be using this in anything but medium range, and barely that. It will usually disable light armoured vehicles. The last thing to note about the equipment itself is it's located in the gadgets slot. I actually struggled to find this to begin with, so that's where it's located, and you can use it with any class. I'll be providing a more in-depth full guide to the crossbow once I've unlocked the remaining elements. Now on to Scavenger mode itself. I was a bit worried about Scavenger because I thought it'd be too much like Gun Game, where people who quickly picked up the best weapons would dominate, but it actually doesn't work out this way most of the time. Scavenger mode is basically Conquest, but with a capping speed of Conquest Domination. It's an infantry game mode, and you start out with only a pistol of your choice and squad perk. You then have to find weapons that are distributed around the maps, and these are graded by rank in terms of 1 to 3. I guess it's their supposed ease of use and power. You can get everything ranging from the crossbow to sniper rifles, shotguns, SMGs and assault rifles. When you pick up weapons though, they'll only have a limited amount of ammo, so don't expect to carry the same weapon for the whole round. It's just not going to happen. This game mode is quite interesting because players who only use 1 to 2 weapons in regular Battlefield are probably going to struggle here in the same way they might be with Gun Game. Having all-around abilities is definitely a bonus when it comes to Scavenger mode, and I've heard feedback from other players from people saying that the weapon spawns are actually being camped out, but from my own experience I've not seen this too much, but I can imagine that it could happen. Overall, I found that it's quite fast and at times intense game mode, especially if you're fighting over a flag, and knowing when to spend time finding weapons and when to push for capping bases, hoping you don't encounter enemies on the way, can be very enjoyable. It's an interesting mode, and it's one that would be right at home in close quarters. The only small negative is that the maps can sometimes be a little bit too big in my opinion for this mode to really work as successfully as it could do. I think though for PC with a larger player count than 24, it's going to be more involved. However, on the flip side of that, the very fact that console has less people almost contributes to the empty, ruined feeling of the maps and makes it feel more like a game of hunting your enemies rather than an all-out battle. So each opportunity providing a different mode and setting there. So now we move on to the first of the 4 maps, Markaz Monolith. This large destroyed cityscape provides intense all-range combat in both rush and conquest. Teams are supported by tanks, fast movers and scout helicopters, and it's one of my favourite maps in the DLC. The street fighting is excellent, and the spaces between structures give enough space that you have to think before committing yourself to crossing open areas. The ruined city in Monolith regularly will be occupied by snipers, so think of the scene from Full Metal Jacket and you're on the right track. As always, tanks will provide strong support if they're not dealt with in a direct fashion, so choosing your class balance is as important here as on any map. Will you be focusing on keeping the air support down or laying mines and RPGs to keep armour suppressed? Do you want to play as fast assault or run recon and support to deal with approaching infantry? This map along with Azadi provide the best all-round open environments to allow for those styles of gameplay. Now many people have noted the inclusion of the orange auburn tint to the map's colour. I personally love this. I think it brings real mood and character to the map design, and it doesn't leave it feeling bland and bleached out. Rush is intense on Markaz, and fighting from one base to the next through the winding streets provides all manner of intense and varying combat situations. You begin your fight on the outskirts before making your way through the streets into the Monolith and its surrounding structures, before pushing into the substation areas and then finally onto the bank. There are huge amounts of flanking opportunities, so defenders will need to know the map's layout intimately to prevent fast flanking attackers. So as often is the case with Battlefield, your own ignorance can really be your downfall. Conquest on Markaz is again huge and varied in its combat. You may find yourself having all-out tank combat down an avenue, or locked in a brutal sniper battle over the Monolith, or in any number of those street-to-street infantry engagements amongst the rubble and ruins of the destroyed buildings of Markaz. As usual for larger maps on Conquest console, it can at times feel slightly empty, but where the fighting is found it's very intense and enjoyable. Often the emptiness of the maps is actually more attributed to public players not having the initiative to actually move around, and when you do get a game with people moving around fast and capping bases, using the helicopter flying down between buildings, mines, tanks, urban combat, it's really fantastic. And for you guys on the PC, it's only going to get even better. EPICENTER is the next map of the Aftermath DLC, and it seems to be one that people have really become attached to quickly. Perhaps because it was traded so much in the run-up to release, but it's also one of the most interesting maps from this DLC. You find yourself fighting amongst post-earthquake ruins with continuing aftershocks, which some people say don't happen that often, but I have found regularly do. This map is very much close quarters urban combat, and you do have access to the light armoured vehicles, but navigating them around the map can be a skill all in itself. Position a rhino correctly though, and you could be reaping the rewards of the often bottlenecked sections of this map. Rush on EPICENTER is reminiscent of maps like Grand Bazaar, but unlike Bazaar, EPICENTER provides you with many more flanking routes, and overall feels much less oppressive. I can imagine that on some games you'll find it difficult to advance on this map, but nothing like some of the maps that are more difficult to advance on. The first base is located in the lower section of a construction area, with a destroyed crane running overhead. Both MCOMs are accessible again from multiple routes, and the intricacy of the surrounding ruins and structures adds to the overall immersiveness of the maps in this DLC. Once destroyed, you then have to tackle the next MCOMs located in the middle of the street. The second base on EPICENTER, it's got more distance between the MCOMs, so as defenders your job is going to be considerably more difficult. However, it is benefited by the fact that both are in much more open areas, making picking off targets at range and setting up LMG positions much more viable. Moving on to the third base, and this is again a close quarter battle. With multiple routes from at least 3 different sides of the building, a fast defence setup is going to be required, and its proximity to the previous base means that you'll find the enemy upon you in very fast succession. Pushing out of the MCOM area and defending the entry points from the street will be the order of the day if you want to keep the defence on this one and a fast, multiple flank attack from the opposite perspective. As a conquest map, EPICENTER is the first of two maps that are much more focused on close quarter battles, its partner being of course Tala Market. Fighting will be intense and range is consistently varying, but you'll find yourself the majority of the time fighting at close to medium range around EPICENTER conquest. With any light vehicles to speak of, it's primarily infantry combat, so pick your class and roll carefully. Many of the bases will have leading bottlenecks and choke points, so be prepared for some hard fighting, and if you're trying to capture a base, for God's sake spread out or you're going to suffer the consequences. Overall, EPICENTER is a fast and furious map, and being able to deal with often harsh choke points will be regularly necessary. As with all the maps in Aftermath, flanking will play a regularly key role for attack, so keep this in mind when attacking or defending. The combat style is unrelenting, and fighting amongst the destroyed ruins whilst contending with aftershocks makes for an exciting and challenging experience. But despite the difficulty of some sections of the map, it never feels overwhelming from either perspective, and it feels very balanced overall. And this can be said for all the game modes, Scavenger included, which can play out very well on this map with its consistently changing range requirements. This means that your weapon pickups become all the more important. Next up is Azadi Palace, and this goes hand in hand with Markaz as the second of the larger maps with wider open areas. Unlike Markaz though, the streets on Azadi Palace are much more confining, and you find yourself in a real mixed bag of ranges. As with Markaz, it's a sniper's paradise with many locations to conceal yourself and lots of long-range engagements are regularly possible. When it comes to rush, the close fighting nature of the early bases means that this is a brutal and hard fought initial combat map. But then it opens up into huge and wide open vistas with the grounds surrounding the palace complex. Fallen floors and destroyed walls create an apocalyptic feel to the combat around Azadi Palace itself. Infantry, both attackers and defenders alike, will need to be aware of again the danger of snipers, but the base itself, the assaulting of it is very much about close quarter combat. And there regularly is a danger of people getting big multi-kills, and that could so easily be avoided. So whether you're attacking or defending the area of Azadi Palace, spread out and move fast. Time wasted here will quickly lead to becoming overwhelmed, and don't rule out the importance of engineers or C4 here, as vehicles can still be a threat and can even be driven up the ramps from the ground to the first floors. From here you're then going to move on to the final base in a construction area, and that's a very straightforward, typical battlefield arrangement. For conquest on Azadi, vehicles and close vehicle support from engineers will play a key role. Snipers again will have a role to play, but due to the lack of air support, this map has very much, I would say, a feeling of bad company too with it. Infantry will have to slog it out on the ground, and with limited vehicles available, choosing where you want to fight, defend and move to can be very important. I already have noticed that on this map more than others, people are failing to proactively move around the map to other bases, instead favouring to defend and hope other people will take up the slack, which is of course a recipe to utter failure. The key to Azadi conquest is to not get bogged down in the palace complex. This huge base is so large that you can easily spend an entire round defending and counter-attacking around it. Don't waste the whole game here, move around as necessary. Azadi is a dynamic conquest map, and I think it offers a great reminder of how interesting conquest can be when played on a map with limited or no air support, as does Markaz. Azadi Palace, as I already stated, is the second larger map in the Aftermath DLC, and for me it helps us remember what Battlefield is all about. Its sheer scale makes you feel you're really part of a battle and not just running for kills in a game. Moving street by street, clearing corners, alleyways and broken piles of rubble, it offers such a variety of combat styles all in one map. The palace complex itself is gorgeous in both design and how it plays out, and there are many locations for snipers, making this, as with the other maps, one to really show your long range skills. But at the same time, it has furious close quarter and anti-vehicle gameplay. The balance of the maps in Aftermath has to be their strongest card to be played, and Azadi is no exception. We move finally on to Tala Market, and the easiest way to picture Tala in your mind is like that of a compass. You have a circle which is crossed with north, south, east and west, and it has a central point with 4 satellite areas around it. It's an extremely claustrophobic map, and despite it offering some of the most intense firefights you'll see, in fact it could easily be a close quarters map were it not for the orbiting roadway. But this is as much a strength as it is a weakness. I've often found that people will gravitate towards one area and not really get involved with many other areas on the map, creating many situations when LMG or sniper can simply cut down the waves of lemmings in their path who didn't realise that following behind 4 of their teammates in a tight alleyway was a bad idea. On the counter side of that, I've also found it very frustrating, because as you move around the map you'll often turn a corner to face 3 enemies or more, and if you even have lightning reflexes there's going to be multiple times when this happens and you come off worse for it. But keeping that in mind simply means you need to approach Talar differently. Running around unless you're clever about how you're moving is going to put you in many of these situations, and a better tactic is to be slower and try to cover areas you can see are going to be more hot for the enemy. Rush is a curious one on Talar. Despite the scale of the map, it plays out quite unusually compared to most games. Typically on Rush you'll be moving in a very linear fashion for the most part, going from base to base in a straightforward manner. This doesn't alter on Talar, it's a straight run from what would be in my mind the east to the west of the map. However, the actual area you can flank is huge. You can move right up to the north and south areas, and this offers a rarely seen option in Rush on Battlefield. The actual distance between bases is tiny. Seriously, you can run from the first to second base of encoms in literally about 10 seconds, it's that small. However, the close quarter bottleneck nature of Talar, this is not as easy as it sounds. And you'll find that taking a direct path to the MCOM simply leaves your whole team slaughtered by well placed LMG teams and snipers. This is where the huge flanking opportunity comes in. The distance you can move out to the sides of the MCOMs gives you strong tactical play to get around these nasty entrenched positions and counterattack from the sides. But Conquest Assault is a different kettle of fish altogether. The market is now fully open, and you have its central sea base orbited by the others on the round, which lies all around the outskirts. You'll have the lightweight vehicles at your disposal to move around the maps, and with the huge scale of Talar these will be very useful, but make no mistake, Talar is all about the market. Control C and you control the game here, if your team is smart anyway. Once you have control of C, it's very easy to branch out onto the other bases to steal or defend them. Now obviously if you did not have C you have no choice but to take the longer runs all the way to the other bases. However, at the same time as with Azadi, getting overly obsessed with C can be a costly mistake to make. If you don't spend time looking at the other bases, it makes no difference if you control the tactical keystone to the map itself. As with the other maps in Aftermath, Talar offers some really interesting and different gameplay options. The way it plays out and the choices that you make in the game will be key to success or failure. Simply running to your targets in a linear fashion is seriously not going to be an option unless you are facing the weakest of opponents. Being able to preempt and predict your enemy's decision remains, as always for me, one of the strongest hands that you can play. And in Talar, where you have such little room for error, this mindset can only be exacerbated. Its tight winding alleyways leave you with often no time to react to a situation, so thinking ahead and establishing a plan for what you want to accomplish will be key. Because on Talar, once you knock the enemy off their feet, they're not getting back up. So in conclusion, it's very easy for me to say that Aftermath is hands down the best DLC since Back to Karkand. Why? Because it simply offers such a strong complement of well-designed, well-balanced maps with the equipment and gameplay to back it up. It doesn't favour one playstyle one way or the other, or one weapon style. Everything has a role to play and a situation to play it in, and if like me you're the style of player who's happy to drop a class or weapon and change out to any given situational change, then it's only going to be a stronger game for you and your team. Failure to adapt to changing threats in Aftermath is going to have a pronounced effect on how your games play out, and the maps themselves reflect this in their wide-ranging style and design. I have seen some people this week saying that the maps all look the same. This is an utterly ignorant statement to make. It's true that the maps look aesthetically similar, only in as much as they contain destroyed buildings, but as I've explained here today, they have a hugely varied and complex foundation for players to build on. If you're in two minds as to whether you should purchase Aftermath or not, don't be. It's not like Close Quarters or Armoured Kill where one style of play was prevalent. Aftermath has something for all, and its design and balance of gameplay should not be missed. Aftermath is everything Battlefield should be, and for those of us who have been playing Battlefield for years and years, it simply reminds you why there is simply nothing that compares to Battlefield on the market today. This is Luetin, Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed the review, as always, please rate, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for some more Battlefield.